Parachuting Hamsters and Andy Russell, Chapter 9. And remember in Chapter 8, the aunt took them to the museum, and with that neighbor boy, Jason, and he is a little poop. And then they went to eat at the cafeteria, and he's what was he doing? Oh, he was eating French fries and dipping them in ice cream. And then he went to the bathroom, and remember then Andy Russell went to the bathroom too to see what he was doing, and he wrote on the bathroom stall like Andy Russell was here. And so Andy was cleaning it off, and then a guard came in, and he said, I didn't do it, and I'm cleaning it up, see? And so he almost got in trouble. And then they are, we're back looking at the art, and then after they got back to, let me see here, did they go back to the apartment? But he and Tamika are thinking that he was the one who did threw the hamsters out and put the butter on the buttons. So that's what they're trying to figure out. Okay, Tamika's tricks. Andy and Tamika walked slowly toward Jason, but before they could reach him, Aunt Mandy said, come with me, I want to show you some more abstract paintings. Okay, so they're still at the museum. Andy, Tamika, and Jason followed her into a room with just a few huge paintings on each wall. Andy and Tamika sat on a bench in the middle of the room facing a painting of what looked like overlapping oddly shaped sheets of colored glass. The plaque below the painting indicated the artist was E.J. Nahum. Did you think of a trick? Andy whispered. I will, Tamika replied quietly. I'll ask him something that has nothing to do with hamsters, but will prove that he did it. That's what I'll do. They continued to look at the abstract paintings until Aunt Mandy told them, it's time for lunch. I know a great place down the street. Before they left the museum, Jason turned in the numbered tag in return for his backpack. He opened the pack, took a marker from his pocket, and dropped it in. Andy whispered to Tamika, that's what he used to write on the bathroom wall. They left the museum, and as they walked to the restaurant, Andy pulled on Jason's backpack. Let go, Jason demanded. Tamika and Aunt Mandy had kept walking. They didn't hear Andy as he whispered to Jason, you got me in trouble in the museum. I had to wash off what you wrote in the bathroom. Jason said, you don't know that I wrote that. Yes, I do. Well, you can't prove it, Jason countered. Andy let go of the backpack. Jason hurried to catch up with Aunt Mandy and Tamika. Andy followed close behind. In the restaurant, Aunt Mandy chose a table by the window. A waiter gave each of them a menu. Andy looked across the table at Jason. Jason smiled and then hid behind his menu. Aunt Mandy asked for a garden salad and iced tea. Tamika asked for a fruit salad and cottage cheese. Jason ordered French toast with lots of syrup and orange soda. And what would you like? The waiter asked Andy. Andy hadn't been thinking about food. He quickly looked at the menu. I'd like a cheese omelet with milk, he said. The waiter carried drinks, a basket of rolls, and a small plate of pats of butter and margarine to the table. While Jason was spreading butter on a roll, Tamika turned to him and asked, are the windows in your apartment stuck? That's a strange question, Aunt Mandy said. I'm just making polite conversation, Tamika told her aunt. I was wondering if Jason can open the windows in his apartment. Can you? She asked him again. Why should I? Jason asked. We have air conditioning. Tamika said. The waiter brought the salads, omelet, and French toast. Andy watched Jason pour lots of syrup on his French toast. Maybe he didn't open the windows and throw out the hamsters, Andy thought as he ate a forkful of omelet. Maybe he has a balcony like Aunt Mandy and threw them from there. When they were done eating, Aunt Mandy looked at her watch. We should get going, she said. We don't want to be late for the ballet. Maybe I can take a few rolls for later? Jason asked the waiter. I might get hungry. The waiter said he could. Take butter too, Tamika told him. You could put it on the roll or on some elevator buttons. Aunt Mandy turned and glared at Tamika. Butter will make a mess in my backpack, Jason said as he put a few rolls in. They took a taxi cab to the ballet, and on the way, Jason slumped low in the back seat. He looked to the side, away from Andy and Tamika and Aunt Mandy. When the taxi cab stopped, Andy gazed up at the tall marble columns at the front of the theater. Beyond the columns were large windows. Andy looked through the windows and saw a huge crystal chandelier. Aunt Mandy and the children got out of the cab. Tamika, Andy, and Jason followed Aunt Mandy into the theater. Andy looked up at the chandelier. It seemed to him like he was standing beneath thousands of large glass snowflakes. "This is some nice place," he said to Aunt Mandy. "Just look at that chandelier." Aunt Mandy, Tamika, and Jason looked up. "Those sure are lots of pieces of glass," Tamika said to Jason. "And do you know how they keep all those pieces of glass up there?" Jason didn't answer. "I'll bet they're all tied together with thin pieces of thread or wire in tiny knots," Tamika said. Then she asked Jason, "Can you tie tiny knots?" Tiny knots, Andy thought, and remembered the hamsters and the handkerchiefs tied to their feet. Whenever he thought about those small animals being mistreated that way, Andy got upset. Jason smiled. "Why should I tie tiny knots?" he asked. "I'm not making a chandelier." "You're asking some very strange questions," Aunt Mandy said. "She sure is," Jason agreed. "She sure is," Tamika mimicked Jason. Then she whispered to Andy as they followed Aunt Mandy and Jason up the stairs. "I ask strange questions because he does strange things. And did you see him smile when I asked about the tiny knots? That proves he's the one." Andy told Tamika, "It doesn't prove anything except that you didn't trick Jason." Aunt Mandy and the children followed an usher to their seats in the very first row of the mezzanine overlooking the stage. Jason stood against the rail and watched the people below in the orchestra level going to their seats. He took a roll from his backpack and held it out over the rail. Oh, gosh. Andy stood next to him and looked down, too. Jason squeezed the roll. Crumbs fell onto the head of a woman in a red dress. She brushed the crumbs off and looked around. Then she looked up and saw Andy. She angrily waved her pointing finger at him. Oh, my gosh. He got Andy in trouble again. "I'm in trouble again for something Jason did," Andy thought. Tamika was sitting on the other side of Aunt Mandy. Andy walked over and sat next to Tamika. "Have you ever seen a ballet?" Aunt Mandy asked. Tamika shook her head. She had never seen a ballet. "I saw one," Andy said. "I saw Swan Lake." "Did you like it?" Aunt Mandy asked. "Well," Andy said slowly. He didn't think Aunt Mandy wanted to hear that he watched it on television and that he tuned in because he liked animals and he thought Swan Lake would be about swans. "It wasn't what I expected," Andy said. "We're seeing Sleeping Beauty," Aunt Mandy said. "Do you know the story of Sleeping Beauty?" "Is that the fairy tale about the Goldie girl and the bears?" Jason asked. "It's about a beautiful princess," Tamika told him. "She's cursed by a wicked fairy that she will stick her finger with a needle and die." "That's right," Aunt Mandy said. Tamika asked Jason, "Do you like fairy tales?" Jason hesitated. Andy watched Jason, though. He's trying to figure out what's the trick in that question. "So am I." "Yes," Jason answered slowly. "I like some fairy tales. Do you like animal tales? Small furry animal tales?" Tamika asked. The theater lights dimmed. "You can talk later," Aunt Mandy said, with a puzzled look on her face. "There will be 2 short intermissions." Dun,